Hi, I'm here. Welcome to Varn blog, and today I'm drinking. I just finished actually a nice cup of Earl Grey. I'm gonna go back to my regular Diet Coke, and today I'm taking questions from you, my Star Wars fans. Preferably about non-political stuff, because I want to stay calm today. And I'm having a nice tea day. I'm wearing, hold on, let me see if I can make this a little bit more visible, you guys. My Mr. T t-shirt. Let's get this back. There we go. And I think Erica is getting some high praise here. My blood pressure is remarkably low even when I'm angry. I just, occasionally storm off streams and break things. I don't really break things. Yeah, so that's what we're doing today. This shirt actually is, it's funny you say swag. This shirt's actually from my ex-wife got it to me before we got married in 2011. So this is shirt's a threadless shirt. It's about 10 years old. It was to celebrate me losing a bunch of weight. And COVID, I put just enough weight back on that it's not a total 10 on me. So not great, but it is what it is. But I got a bike today, and I've been outside biking around the Jordan River. Probably did about 6 miles today, which was refreshing. You guys probably didn't, favorite rabbi or Jewish thinker. I like Gershom Slocum. So a lot actually. Favorite. So, as far as Jewish thinkers go, early Hasidim are interesting. Later Hasidim are not. So that's a good question. I have a complicated relationship with Jewish thought. I have a pretty okay. Abraham Joshua Herschel's okay. Favorite spicy food. I made eggs with habaneros this morning, but I just love spicy food in general. I particularly like Korean spicy food, or Indian spicy food. Indian because it's more complex. So what is best in life? To see your enemies driven before you and hear the lamentations of their people. So you can ask me all kinds of questions today. Thoughts on Kabbalah? What about Kabbalah? One, it's a weird system of angels. Two, it has a complicated theology that kind of makes Maimonidean halakha go kind of nuts. And it seems very Gnostic in origin. So, but beyond that, I think it's a little bit overrated. It has been used to sell, all kinds of hippy dippy crap. To best book of the Bible, Ecclesiastes. What's wrong with the Gnostics? They're Gnostics. There's nothing wrong with the Gnostics. They're just world-hating Platonists with a plethora of gods. There's nothing wrong with them beyond that. I would even subscribe to the idea that maybe the term Gnostic is a misguided term because there's so many different groups that are included in that. But my point is that Kabbalah has a strong pool of esoteric Platonism in it. and seems to have developed as a response to Christian mysticism, which then goes back and informs Christian mysticism. It's kind of funny like that. How do I choose what to read next? I usually read 4 or 5 books at a time. And usually what I do is I read a poetry book or a book or a graphic novel, actually, as a palate cleanser between other things, so I don't get bored. Do you believe in aliens? First question, probably. Second question, no. I don't. The likelihood that aliens would stay hidden is pretty low. So yeah. Do I think there are aliens in the solar system? Yes. I kind of think Grimlock. I kind of agree with you. Obama is like cute for Shiskas. I think about certain like Merkaba mysticism and temple mysticism is fascinating. Lurian Kabbalah is weird, and modern Kabbalah is definitely packaged for mass consumption, decoupled from its historical baggage. Well, I mean, people tend to forget that, like, my interest, my first interest, like, in high school, I wanted to be a religious studies anthropologist or a science journalist. Those were my 2 dreams, right? And so I have spent a lot of time studying religion. I didn't actually study it formally in college, hardly at all, only indirectly through historical philosophy classes. I also, my interest in anthropology actually is not cultural. It was more, for lack of a better term, forensic. Sufism's wild. I wish I knew more about it. I've been to a couple of Sufi services in Turkey and Egypt. Like Sufism ranges from, it's Western eclectic, or even Indian eclectic forms that like make peace with certain kinds of Hindu traditions to like way more militant than even Wahhabism can be. I mean, it's not modernly, but it was in the medieval period. Zoroastrianism, it's hard for me to even say it's one religion. So because, like, if you look through the Avestas and whatnot, the modern Parsi stuff seems to go back pretty far. And man, once you look at Parsi customs and look at Talmudic Jewish customs, the Babylonian Talmud makes a lot more sense that it's the Balavi that's so important on the modern Jews, because it seems like a lot of that stuff comes from Zoroastrianism. But when you look at ancient Zoroastrianism, was it actually monotheistic? How was Zuvanism a part of it? These things are harder to answer. There has been some kind of Zoroastrian religion for at least 3,000 years, but it's like actually is Second Temple Judaism and pre-Second Temple Judaism the same religion as modern Judaism? And the answer to that actually isn't an easy question. Wow, I had AM on, and you guys go full Posadist on me. Well, if that's what people were interested in, I used to write more about it. I know a little bit about Baha'i. I had a good friend, Barry, who is an Iranian refugee who is a Baha'i. Hey JG. Fancy seeing you here. Felon Jetty is one of my Felon Getty. I can't speak all of a sudden, is one of my favorite poets from the Beat generation. I do count him as kind of an influence, but it's more just I think that Corso and De Prima and even Anne Waldman are more of influences because their interest in Asian poetry got me interested in Asian poetry. No, Ferlinghetti was not a Posadist that I know of. What do you call the general class of beverage I'm consuming? We call it Diet Coke or Coke Zero. I also drink a ton of tea. So sometimes you'll see me sport seltzer water. You won't see me drink anything with calories, generally on air. I think Ferlinghetti is awesome. I mean, like, I have some of his books back here. Just so you guys can see, this is my partner and I's office. There are 7 bookshelves of just poetry back here, and upstairs is the historical books. Favorite tea, Earl Grey, particularly an Imperial Earl Grey from Ahmad Teas, which is a British tea aimed at Arab countries. I go to the Persian store to get it. So yeah. I have a sectarian review episode coming up on Tarkovsky again, on one of my other favorite Tarkovsky movies. My brain just went wiped. Nostalgia. It's on our Tarkovsky movies about memory. We when the Former People podcast gets launched, we will talk more about it. I like a good pura too, but that's a tea service, and it takes. When my friend Austra's around, we do it. We go a good pura. There's a good Korean green tea pura that's awesome. What about diet soap? I only drink colas as far as sodas go. Oh yeah, Song 4K. You're out. You're out. Out. No. You mentioned how one should study the ancient gods, not just their philosophy. Any recommendation on the takes of this? So I keep on recommending this podcast, which is A Secret History of Western Esotericism, because it's actually a history of Western religion and its relationship with ancient philosophy. And so, for example, if you want to understand the Stoics, you have to understand their materialist theology, and you have to understand what they thought Zeus was. So I actually just think the Oxford books on these topics are really helpful. In addition to that, I think particularly the work of Walter Burkitt, who was good on the East Asian, North African influences on Greek religion, but also explains the relationship of Greek religion, the Greek philosophy. That scholarly work is really useful. Most ancient, like when people talk about ancient philosophies, Buddhism and Hinduism and the various schools of Hinduism, particularly the modern schools and the various yoga schools, which arguably aren't the same religion, the 5 Orthodox schools and the 3 unorthodox schools of I think it's 5 Orthodox schools of Hinduism. They don't have the same ideas about God, or gods or whatever, like at all. But they're ancient religions. I mean, one of the things I would say is maybe even religion is a misleading term, because our modern understanding of religio, even though it comes from an ancient Latin word, is totally influenced by Abrahamic and specifically Christian and Islamic notions of religion. Yeah. Ancient text. I actually really like, as far as like things that will blow your mind that are actually useful to the modern world. Nagarjuna is a lot more interesting than people realize. Anything by Porphyry are, yeah. Well, yeah, you need to know cynicism and stoicism, and also the Hellenized Jewish thinkers who were Hebraic Platonists who mostly actually concerned themselves in Greek, like Philo of Alexandria, to really understand a lot of what's going on with the language of the Septuagint. No, I haven't listened to the new Busta Rhymes album yet because I am lame. Coolest city. My favorite city that I have visited is Taipei. It's everything I like about China with none of the stuff I dislike. Varn listens to hip hop primarily from 10 years ago. I listen to a lot of the stuff you'd expect me to listen to. Aesop Rock, not Aesop Rocky. Yeah, keep DNX in our thoughts. I like Sage Francis. I like Tribe Called Quest. I was talking to my partner today about Arrested Development. Yeah, I like wordy stuff. I actually like listen to it sometimes when I'm writing and listen to a modern classical. I am familiar with both Carvaka and Avajekta. I think I pronounced that right. Ancient Indian materialism schools. There are, as well as I'm familiar with Epicureanism and Stoicism, which are both materialist. Although they're materialist in ways that still have room for gods, even though a lot of modern atheists don't like talking about it. A lot of the ancients just thought the gods were physical beings, like literally, it was the Platonists who thought they were weirdly, other like Platonic math forms. Another thing, when you read Plato, man, read it thinking that Plato's basic assumptions on logic are based off of classical geometry. Because once I realized how much Plato was like making assumptions of logic based purely off of like geometric proofs and the logic of geometric proofs, like a lot of Plato made more sense, including the weird esoteric crap. So yeah, I don't get to talk about this stuff anymore. Everyone's always asking me about Marx. I like Talib Kweli a lot, actually. I haven't listened to Talib Kweli. I should look at what have I been listening to. Let me look at my Spotify list. Oh no, I forgot my password. Hey. Oh, that's wrong. I am a fan of Silver Jews. I like David Berman a lot before he killed himself. Did I listen to K-pop? Yes, because it was ubiquitous when I was in Korea. Do I like K-pop? K-pop is like K-pop is engineered to be enjoyable. It is probably some of the most engineered music on the planet, even more than like a lot of modern pop. But I think it's pretty good stuff. I mean, it's pretty good stuff if you're not paying attention to it. My favorite K-pop band is a band called SHINee. No one knows them anymore because it's like from 15 years ago. But I was kind of into K-punk for a while, and I don't mean Mark Fisher's blog, although I was reading that in Korea too, ironically. I think I may have found it actually looking for a blog on punk. What do you think, Granddaddy and Jason? I listened to all the Granddaddy albums, but I think Software Slump has been in my rotation for 20 years almost. So What's the most common embarrassing musical artist that I generally enjoy? I'm a music snob. I mean, oh God, when I was in high school, I wrote for music zines. My first writing pieces. I think the first piece I ever published was a review of the Swans that actually they reprinted on their website when I was 14 years old. But the most common embarrassing musical artist I generally enjoy. I like Madonna's Ray of Light album. I'm old, man. Have you read in some? No, I have not. And so I actually it's on my Kindle to read. Would you ever visit killfromtheheart.com? That was a great archive. No, I didn't. I kind of probably fell out before that time period. I was, more of a, but believe it or not, I was more in the goth music, but I was constantly writing in the punk scene and particularly a hardcore scene. So like today I was listening, like when I was driving my bike around Jordan River, I was listening to Texas is the Reason and Channels and Jawbox and I am promoting parasocial relationships with you guys. This is probably not healthy. Except for JD and Erica and some of the people here I've actually known for JD I've known for over 15 years in online form. It's pretty impressive. I like Lana Del Rey's first two albums. So what else do I listen to? I liked Perfect Circle. I actually reviewed Perfect Circle's first album when it came out. I love Ubik as far as my favorite Philip K. Dick book. I'm a big PKD fan. It's actually something that Doug Lane and I used to share. I'll check out the new. I actually like Sia too. I guess there's a lot of embarrassing pop I like. Yeah. Jung Hyun did kill himself, unfortunately. JD, don't mock our live journal days. I actually miss it. It was cringe, but we also really like. When you had to write paragraphs every day. Do Sex soundtrack is amazing. What do I like about making vlogs podcast? The money. No, I actually don't make a lot of money from vlogs. I make no money from vlogs. This is not monetized at all. What I like about doing my vlog is for the first time in forever I'm unedited. I'm on podcast. I'm heavily edited. I really appreciate how Esri edits me. She edits for Immortal Science because I can listen and not know until she reminds me what she took out. That she took out 2 hours of of our recording. Because I'm all over the place. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, they were a weird time. The 2000s were weird. I was thinking about that today. I woke up this morning. I'll tell you what I'm reading right now. I'm reading Chuck Klosterman's 4, which is, about the aughts as a decade. I ride just a retrospect city bike. It's got 7 gears, nice $300 bike. It's what I could afford. Derek's thoughts on what to do in an apolitical university besides the U.S. military base. Not even normie stuff happens on campus. That's a tough one. Poetry readings are kind of fun. You can do what most students do and drink yourself to death. Don't do that, but you could do it. Most professors do that too. I remember I was at AWP in New Orleans in 2001. It was my yeah. I was talking about turning 21 in the right place, right? And it was, but it was after I was 21. No, it was 2002. It was after 9/11. I don't remember. I was 21 when I went. Whatever. But the bar opened um, at AWP New Orleans at 9 a.m. and it was packed from 9 a.m. forward. If you don't know what AWP, it's Associated Writers Programs. It's the creative writing thing. I went to it as an undergrad. I've actually only gone to one AWP, even though I have a book and a bunch of other stuff, and I have an MFA. I avoid AWP like the plague. I sometimes wish I'd go back. I miss a lot of my MFA friends, but I'm not willing to do it. So yeah, so I ride a retrospect city bike. I just started picking it back up this week. I used to ride bikes in Korea. The 2000s, I was a teacher. I started teaching in 2000s when emo was still a thing. One of the things about right now aesthetically is like cliques and all that are pretty much only decided by the price of your phone and your shoes. But like kids don't do that anymore. It's actually kind of weird. Like, yes, there are people with strange hair. Yes, everybody's like experimenting with pronouns and deciding if they're genderqueer or whatever. I mean, that is a real thing. But like even emo and golf hoodies and all that stuff seem to be a thing of the past. So do I play in bands? Not anymore. Did I in high school? Yes. I was a drummer. Hi, Andre. I don't know. I'm so mixed on protest. My friend, this is dangerously close to political, so I'll answer it carefully. My friend David was, chastising Andy from Antifada about their points of view on protest, but I'm so mixed on protesting. Like, it's good practice for a lot of things if you think it's good for the people doing it, as far as like getting logistics work done, building organizational groups. But it's also like, if you think the protest accomplish anything as a protest, it's just a waste of time. So it depends on what you think it's for. You can invite notable people to speak. I don't know. I mean, like, it's so interesting hearing about campus culture now because, I saw it change when I was actually on campus. So when in 2000 and 1999 and 2000, Patch Adams came to my school to do a speech and suggested we read "The Best Democracy Money Can Buy" by Greg Palast, and he got booed off stage. 5 years later, there were like gender inclusive protests and stuff supporting Amiri Baraka, which I was oddly not in support of. So no more skater kids table. It is. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think of it like I will say this. Yeah, I know. This was the thing was people were protesting and being removed as poet laureate of New Jersey, but they didn't know the context of why it was removed. I was also a paleo conservative at the time, but like I tended to be anti-Israel because certain positions of my life have not changed much. Yeah, Patch Adams was a real person. Anyway, on skater kids, it's a complicated scenario with these kids because in one sense there is a lot less bullying and there's a lot less cliquishness, but the social economic bullying or shaming is actually still as ubiquitous as it ever was. What I do see, what's utterly not okay, though, is making fun of people with disabilities and sexuality in ways that even when I started teaching 10 years ago was okay. There's no Amir Baracus is a really complicated figure because his stances on black nationalism and his relationships to his relationships to Jewishness and his belief that the Israelis were behind 9/11 for a little while seem to be part of the issue. But he's no more incoherent than most black nationalists, and I don't think he was like, he wasn't explicitly like a racialist, like an old school Nation of Islam person or anything like that. Well, Ireland is so I can't tell you what to do about Ireland. You know what I know about Ireland? That a good portion of my ancestors come from Ulster. Um, the parts that are not like Bulgarian Jewish or North African. A good portion of my ancestors come from Northumbria and Scotland. And some of those same ancestors also come from Ulster. And I like watching Irish people drink things on YouTube. Yeah. That, but when I want to turn my brain off, I watch the Irish Try channel. I've never been to Ireland. I've actually never been to the British Isles at all, which is weird, right? Because I have a ton of friends there, like people I met when I was abroad, people I worked with. Zero Books is actually technically based out of the UK, and I have a lot of Irish fans. Actually, weirdly, Irish and Swedish fans, which is kind of strange. But never been to either of those places. I've lived in Germany briefly. I've been to Turkey. I've been to France. I've been to Italy. Dated a woman from Italy for a while. So yeah, crushed on another woman from Italy for a while. Thaddeus Russell and Angela Nagel. Wow. Thaddeus was an interesting interview because he made me meet him in person. So I actually flew to Portland and met Doug Lane for the first time at that point. I've met with Doug Lane twice, I think, beyond that now. And Thaddeus made me go into a room with no prep and just wanted to interview me raw. And I did it. Although he, best looking national frag. Myanmar is kind of cool. Some of the African ones are wild in a good way. Yeah, he's a very particular kind of dude. He was nice to me. He even asked me to be involved, even though I'm a dirty Marxist. He asked me to be involved with his university. Did Benjamin try to synthesize Kabbalah with Marxism as such pursuit worthwhile, applicable to other traditions? Yes, he did, and I don't know. Okay, I don't know why we want to make Marxism, which claims to be a science but has religious tendencies, more religious by combining it with explicitly mystical systems. Like Marxo and anarcho-Buddhism are another example of this. I will say that those worldviews, like those old religions, have epistemologies that are fundamentally incompatible with modern epistemologies, and that most religious people modernly are secularized, even if they're very religious. So no, can taking the structure of something like Kabbalah and applying it to math and scientific problems be interesting as a kind of semi-arbitrary lens to which to limit your thinking? And yes, is it worth doing? I don't know. I'm not anti-religious at all. So, but in fact, I've been a couple of religions. But when it comes to Marxism, I prefer my Marxism materialist. At least methodologically, if not ontologically. What's the origin of the term British Isles, Pangloss? Oh, so you found me through the Thad interview. Yeah. That is like a postmodern religion paramount. I love Berserk, both the original late '90s anime and the new movies are okay. I've been reading the manga since I was like 15. So, Neo Genesis Evangelion's okay because everybody from my age group likes that. Oh, LARPing was my introduction to politicking, both in unions and in my job. My that interview is. I think it was one of the first times. Jason Miles also let me go personal. Um. Uh. Oh yeah, Jason Miles let me go personal, but Thad wanted me to go personal about why I believed what I believe. It's an imperfect interview though. Um. So yeah, but yeah, I was a game master for a fairly massive LARP in Macon, Georgia, about a year. Um, I LARPed from age 17 to about age 21 and grew out of it. Although I lived with two of my my ex-wife and I lived with two lovely lesbian roommates who were LARPers well into their 30s. So I was around that for a long time, and I was one of as far as I know, 10 years ago, I was one of the first people to call a lot of online politics LARPing. But that's also an obvious comparison from popular culture from people my age. You know, um, well, of course, it has colonial origins. In fact, it's clearly an attempt to retroject Anglo-Saxon supremacy onto Celtic-speaking peoples of 2,000 years ago to try to justify the turn of the English. Clearly, but um, I'm also not going to get too upset about calling something the Sea of Japan or the South China Sea or whatever. I remember living in Korea, and for years after living in Korea, I had a vaguely anti-Japanese bias that I couldn't get rid of. Um, yeah, my favorite thing about Ireland is the British basically invented modern policing to control you. Uh, this is not my favorite. I mean, it's not my favorite thing for either the Irish people or for the world, but it's one of my favorite facts. When people talk about like in America, there's this oversimplification that the police came from slave patrols, which is not entirely false, but there are police actually before there were even slave patrols. But the first formalizing part, um, Saxons right off throw off the Norman yoke, throw off the Saxon yoke too, man. Um, I've been reading a bunch of I read weird stuff, guys. You guys don't know. Like when I'm not on for Zero and for Mortal Science, and I've been reading History of Separation by EndNotes now for 6 months, over and over and over again. John D. Somebody consulted the source of all real knowledge, which is the OED. Non-fungible tokens. Um, I don't really have a thoughts on non-fungible on tokens. No. All right. Let's see. Any other comments, questions? Oh, the other source of all knowledge, which is Wikipedia. Well, Ireland and the northern parts of France, but I mean, like, I don't know, colonialism. Modern colonialism kind of gets a good footing in Ireland and in the Scottish Highlands. Yeah, and its instantiation in the English speaking world. Now, the Portuguese and Spanish speaking world had started it based off of their participation in Arab slave markets. So, shittiest car I've ever owned. I have only owned 4 cars. The best car I've ever owned is probably the one that my ex-wife gave me, which is a 20-year-old Infiniti, and it's only nice because it has seat warmers and a really nice CD player from 20 years ago. I love my Scion XP, which is the only new car I ever owned, and I loved my HHR. But the shittiest car I ever owned was a puke green 1975 Ford LTD, which I drove from 1999 to 2001 when it died. But late millennials and Zoomers. Yeah, I know. Actually, it's interesting watching the stuff that was popular with Gen Xers and early millennials show back up again with Zoomers and late millennials. I Zoomers remind me of Gen X actually, and the assumption of their progressiveness amuses me. Dealing with them. I've never met Jacob Stevens. I wouldn't know if he was CIA. I have funny stories about people who work in military intelligence, and one of my best friends used to work for the Bureau of Labor Statistics and had to get a security clearance. And when she used me as a reference, I actually came back as a ding. But drums. A good friend of mine, she was teaching me the Doombek, but I love drums. Other instruments I like to listen to, you know, I don't know. I like a lot. I do like a lot of Middle Eastern music. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Survive the Jive came up on my Twitter, right? Because I'm also fascinated with Nordic paganism. All right. And Celtic paganism. Not for like obvious reason. I mean, like, I'm fascinated with all kinds of pre-Abrahamic religions. And of the ones I've lived in Korea, hands down. And some of that Survive the Jive guy stuff is pretty good, and then he sneaks in folkish stuff and questionable interpretations of DNA evidence, etc. He's folkish. I actually went through a bunch of stuff to figure that out, but he's folkish, yeah. I didn't know it either. I shared some of his stuff, and then I went back and I looked at his tattoos, and then I read a bunch of forums about him, and it was debated in both white nationalist forums and in non-folkish heathenry forums, which is an obscure part of the internet I have to go into. But yes, and the other hint, yeah, well, yes, John Dee was part of the angels told him to colonize us. But the Survive the Jive guy has some very sketch political stuff, and his use of genetics is particular, and it's a tell that he's folkish, or at least he's soft folkish. But some of his tattoos are sketch. So, my first claim to fame on the internet was actually interviewing Reconstructionists, Hellenismos, and Celtic pagans who were reacting to Neo-Druidism. And I was actually cited as a source in Wikipedia for years on that topic because I was the only person doing interviews on it. It's kind of funny because John Hunt has a line that caters to that, and I was laughing because I know some of the people in that world from when I interviewed them. And in fact, the very first interview I did with Doug Lane and with Sea Realm, it's the second and third podcast I ever did, was talking about how studying weirdo pagan marginal groups was very similar to studying weirdo left marginal groups, even in terms of their class dynamics, the expansion of education leading to increased standards of demands and internet culture, but with more reactive formations becoming more and more popular over time. And I think that's true on the left too, by the way. So yeah. Yep, that was who I was talking about on the Steak Patty's Day convo when we were talking about focus stuff in the middle. Any other questions? Do you think any of the men's issues brought up with MRAs or other manners for people can be immediately appropriated by the... Whoa. In the original MRA stuff from the 80s, there was some legitimate stuff brought up about divorce laws. And having been divorced twice, I do think the left needs to speak better to those issues, not just for men, but for women too. So it's a thing that I think we could be better about dealing with. A lot of the feminism of the 80s and 90s manifested in some particularly punitive ways, in ways that also weirdly were kind of still dependent on patriarchy. So thoughts on the confessing church in Germany during World War II? Just because do you mean is or isn't a that the Catholics were Nazi adjacent? Is that what you're asking me? Or that Lutheranism contributed to anti-Semitism, or what? What? Be more specific. Favorite James Bond movie? I like the old Connery Bonds because they're crazy. But I think my favorite, honestly, if I'm completely honest, is the Roger Dalton one because it's the first one I saw. Oh yeah, there was a conferful about Anglo-Saxon, Nordic, and something else studies, and somebody was trying to claim the use of Anglo-Saxon was racist. Yeah, Timothy Dalton. Thank you. That one. I also enjoy Connery. The Connery ones are pretty great too. And I think I was watching every Christmas with my current partner Kristen. We watch we sit down and watch a bunch of 80s ones with a young hot Christopher Walken and stuff like that in it. I do love me some bad. I mean, the Bond movies are terrible, but I even like I like the Daniel Craig revisionism. Actually, funny story. When I was in Mexico City in 2014, they were filming one of I think it was Spectre, and I was in the Zocalo in Mexico City on my vacation, and I couldn't actually appreciate it because they were filming helicopter fights for Spectre over my head. So I was within proximity of Daniel Craig at a cheap hostel with my ex-wife. Yeah. Scottish flags keep becoming black flags because they should become black flags. I haven't listened to the Kill James Bond podcast, but should I? Better question. Have you seen Patrick? Yes, I've seen The Prisoner. How dare you? Yeah, a lot of European reenactment too were semi right-wing and Volkish. there's a couple that aren't. I like Shadversity. That's kind of different. I also spent a long time I spent a long time adjacent to the pagan community. So any interest in Warhol, Caravaggio, etc. Normally, there's a Bosch book behind. Let me see, it's right here. It's normally in frame, and I used to put it upside down to bug the general intellect unit people. I don't love Warhol. I do like Caravaggio. My favorite artist is Francis Bacon, and my second favorite artist is Bosch. And then I also like most of the surrealists. I'm pretty mid-brow on that. If I stopped watching people because they were Mormon, I would like not live here. But Kerouac needed to revise. I loved Kerouac when I was in high school, and I grew out of it. Similar to Ginsberg, I actually like a lot of the beats, but the most famous beats are not the best beats. So someone actually someone actually stumped me on a question. I don't know anything about Stanislav Brzezinski. Yeah, the pagan community. It's interesting because like casual interest in astrology and magic has increased, but like most of the formal pagan organizations are actually dying. They were mostly boomers and Gen Xers, and they're all aging out. Um, yeah, I've heard Post Malone's Nirvana cover. Uh, again, hmm, if I get mad at people for entertaining centrists, I nothing can be done. Uh, but Sargon sketch, I get that. That doesn't surprise me. Um, yeah, yeah, but the funny thing about me in Utah is I have no historical relationship to this place. I came here because my ex-wife had cancer, and they have a very good cancer center here. She's from Wyoming, um, and I've stayed because I have a good job, and I kind of like Salt Lake City, and I love the desert. I avoid Mormons, although I keep posting in my house for them. Oh yeah, I do know who that is. Um, but barely. I now that you tell me what he does, I think I've seen some of it. But um, let me make sure though before I speak out of turn and lie. Um, oh yeah, I've seen his work. In fact, I used one of his works on as a background image of um, it's hard to know how big it is in the United States too. Like I said, most of the pagan organizations are actually dying. Their membership is declining. Um, there's actually been some uptick in the folkish ones. Brzezinski, yeah, you better duck, Erica. Um, oh yeah, Kerouac. I don't stop reading people up for their political views because that's. I'll be honest. The two greatest left artists are not that good. So, um, and most artists have terrible politics, even when they're left wing. No, I don't have Mothman theories. Yeah, I don't care about artists. Well, I do care, but I'm not. I mean, my favorite poets are mostly are mostly like Charles Olson and Alice Fulton, and I love and um, I love Carl Dennis, but I also really like Ezra Pound. Um, what is your future co-author talking about when the promotion of impressionism to de-radicalize? There were most of them arts movements were both the MFA movement and the promotion of impressionism in the United States was to break up the artist communities, which tend to also be adjacent to radical politics. Most of their art was not explicitly political, but like for example, abstract impressionism in particular was actually getting a lot of cultural funding by like the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was being funded by the OSS and later the CIA. The CIA also contributed money to the foundation of the MFA programs. Um, so yeah. Yeah, I don't know that weebs are inherently such either. I mean, like, look, I'm really into Yukio Mishima still to this day, and he was fascist, so you know, whatever. I wrote some of my first poetry cycles about Yukio Mishima because his lifestyle blew my mind. Do you read Valiant comics? Yes, I do. You can find that out on Goodreads. Both the classic and the what? My love of Mishima. Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies too. Um, it also has my anti-romanticism. I have, and I like Amy Kissen's. Um, but I like Valiant. Well, Valiant comics aren't good, but they're enjoyable. um, they definitely come out of the whole classic. You know, we're gonna out edge Lord early Image and Marvel in the '90s, but with some classic premises. Um, yeah, it resonated with me in the late '90s, early aughts too. In fact, the second poem I ever published, the first one that got published off the internet, was a poem about Mishma. Um, futurists were the same. If you read the Dadaist, I took a bunch of courses in art history, of course, when I was bored. And so, side note about me, one of the reasons why I had so many classes in undergrad and created this liberal studies, second degree that became my anthropology and philosophy program was because I did most of my English courses, but they only taught some of the required courses every 2 years, so I just had to stay in school to keep my uh, credentialing, and I had taken a lot of anthropology, even though we didn't have a full program at the school I was at, because it was part of what I wanted to do with journalism and science writing, and then I got into philosophy and turned in there. Gods and Radicals Press is kind of fun. It's weird though. Yeah, I think you're right about Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. Gods and Radicals Press is weird, but I do listen to it sometimes and I read it sometimes. It's left anarcho-paganism. So, but anyway, the Dadaist. If you read Grail Marcus's Lipstick Traces, which talks about this effects on pop culture and the fact that punk also had a similar split to Dada, that there was a tendency to go either communist or fascist in response to World War I, and then the punk movement, you had similar tendencies, people moving more and more into like anarcho-communism, communist adjacent areas, or moving straight into fascism, into oi punk, etc. And Grail Marcus makes a pretty convincing argument that that part of this actually does trace back to. I don't like Grant Morrison. Actually, I like Grant Morrison until about 2005, and then I think he huffed his own fumes to the point of absurdity. I like The Filth by him. I do like Transmetropolitan. That's not what Grant's Morrison. Is that Grant Morrison? Grant Morrison. No, that's Warren Ellis. I do like some of the Invisibles, and I do like his run on Animal Man. But I don't love no, I like the Invisibles. And I like some of Doom Patrol, and I like his run on Animal Man. I think I get annoyed with him by the time he does Batman and X-Men and starts doing conventional comics. Although I think his Batman Gothic is okay. The thing is, he's been doing this Gnostic shit. Yeah, I know Warren Ellis for Transmetropolitan. We'll get back to Warren Ellis. I actually think Delano run on Animal Man is pretty good too. So yeah, Christopher Lloyd. What about Christopher Lloyd? Bogan Mormonism. You guys are getting hard for me to follow. And for people who don't see this stream, they're not going to understand any of this. So this is going to be fun to. This is why I don't actually record these and put them on. There's been a lot of requests for me to record these and put them on. You read that as a teen? Oh yeah, I forget I'm a decade older than you. Okay, I read that in college, in grad school actually. Some Transmet, and I remember we stole a lot of Transmet stuff for making icons on LiveJournal. It was like Transmet stuff and Discordian stuff and Church of Soul Genius stuff. Oh yeah, there's a lot of rappers who agreed to speak for Alex Jones. There's a lot of people very frustrated with Obama, and Jones was good at picking it up. Immortal Technique, I kind of like it. It's been a long time since I've listened to it, honestly. I mean, the music I've listened to the most is like avant-garde classical music. I listen to a lot of black metal. I listen to a lot of neo folk, which I know makes me sketch. But I do. I mean, it's just the truth. I really like Rome. A lot of people turn into truthers, though. I mean, people talk about Trump derangement syndrome, but I think people forget how many people lost their damn minds during the Bush administration. I mean, Matt Taibbi, when I read him and liked him, was writing about left-wing truthism and its pernicious effects and overlaps with right-wingism in the middle of the aughts. Yeah. Well, TrueAnon's kind of a truther stuff. I won't mock you. There is a way, and me and JJ Michaels have talked about this. We actually do think there was a government cover-up on putting all the information in the 9/11 Commission. But I love Joanna Newsom. She's even an influence on my poetry. But I don't think the government knew anything like that. I do like 12-tone classical stuff, yes. I like a lot of I listen to a lot of non-standard tone music. Yeah, I mean, like, so people have said that I'm truther adjacent, but like I basically believe the standard story about what happened on 9/11. What I don't believe is the government response for it was competent, and I do think there was a mild cover up in that regard. Also covering up the response of U.S. allies, to 9/11, and I also think that there was intelligence the government had. Like, when it happened, I remember, like, I was 21 years old. My first wife was from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So of course I freaked out because she was still back in Pennsylvania when that happened. Um, there's poems about this in my book, that the details that I talk about are actually true on. Like we basically went orgiastic on 9/11 and grief. We had a weird grief response and then watched Sod and got really drunk. I was 22-ish, yeah, when it happened. Erica is a few years older than me. No, Sod, not Marat Sod. Sod. Yeah, we can talk about hardcore stuff if you want to, because I have PTSD for a reason. I'm not joking about that. I'm not exaggerating it. So yeah. No, it wasn't Sod. It was Quills. It's about Sod. See, I can't even remember it. So long ago. I wrote a series of essays about this that are probably still available somewhere on the internet, about apocalypticism, and a lot of how my punk rock friends became like weird religious fanatics. I think in general, YouTube is censoring both conspiratorial stuff, but also even history to the point of irresponsibility. Cynical historians talk about how they have deliberately suppressed Holocaust videos and stuff like that because they want to appease a bunch of different groups. Not all of them have anything to do with U.S. politics, and you can figure out where that goes. Yeah, I'm always want to talk about anthropology. I want to do something with Arnold of Fight Like an Animal because he I mean, look, there was a conspiracy. Well, not a conspiracy theory. There's an accusation that I was a race realist for a long time. One, because I was a paleoconservative in my past, but two, because I take genetic studies of human populations seriously. What was funny is the thing I wrote that got me called a race realist was actually saying that race doesn't exist because of human genetic drift and the diversity, and the fact that both genotype diversity amongst Africans, particularly, quote, black Africans, unquote, is higher than all other peoples put together, despite the fact that there's bigger differences in morphology and phenotype expression. And weirdly, someone tried to say that I was a race realist for that. And also that I was a race realist for saying that, like, by no one's standard, there's a lot of racial categories like Latino or Arab hold up. That those were linguistic categories and are related to a pre-modern, pre-biological notion of race. I've also been interested in following the debates about the use of the term race in classical studies. There was one classicist who thinks it should be used, but trying to say, well, race is a social construct. It's not tied to biology. And I'm like, yes, but everyone modernly thinks it is. So going back and talking about race when talking about the Romans confuses the crap out of people. Yeah, Chris Knight. And it wasn't great, actually. Chris Knight's actually easy to debunk himself. For example, he takes some wild speculative beliefs about hunter gatherers that are not commonly held by most anthropologist. And he also mischaracterizes why Marshall Solins and David Graeber don't use hunter-gatherer categories, because they think it's a too broad of a generalization based off of misunderstandings of Marxist modes of production. It was not excellent. If you were convinced by that, it's because you don't know much about anthropology yourself. Over and out. Chris Knight also wrote a book on Chomsky that I thought was interesting, but what I will say, what Chris Knight got right is Graeber's overuse of his early work on Madagascar. I think that Chris Knight was particularly good on that, but I think his criticisms of Graeber's use of hunter-gatherer stuff is frankly dishonest. I can literally point to you in the preface of the Solins Graeber book and in Fragments of Anarchist Anthropology, where Graeber specifically mentions some of the things Chris Knight accuses him of and talks about why he doesn't use them. Chris Knight clearly has a very vulgar mode of production. He's trying to reread that back into anthropology. That is not common in anthropology. Yeah. So some people found me from zero. Some people found me from alpha to omega. Me yelling at Tom is like something that I've done for 20 years. Not 20 years, actually. Tom and I, the first interview I did with Tom was in 2012. So yeah. I love Tom O'Brien, actually, even though I don't agree with him on much of anything, and I love pointing out that like every political prediction he's made to me has been wrong, and I've been wrong on like one thing. No, I mean, I guess I should be more charitable to Chris Knight. It's just a lot of people were super impressed by that, and it was based off of like not being totally fair to Graeber. But Chris Knight was dead on about Graeber's misuse of Madagascar as a world model, and he's also onto something that I wish he explored more. After Occupy, Graeber got more and more into modern monetary theory, and there's been all these anarchists interested in modern monetary theory, and I don't get it, because like anarcho-anthropologists being interested in chartalism, which is literally like all economics is dependent on the state, and that state coercion is literally the foundation of all modern economy, and power law, that's weird. I don't have a lot of starts in generative anthropology. It's stuff came about after me. I've also been misidentified as an anthropologist, which is funny. There's a whole Reddit when I talked about Marxist anthropologist Derek Varn talked about how in Hebrew there was no gender, and then I used the wrong Hebrew character because I was copying and pasting, actually, because I don't have a Hebrew keyboard. Oh yeah, definitely Junior Sketch. A lot of neofolk answers. I mean, I love what's my favorite neofolk stuff? Actually, my favorite neofolk stuff is probably Birch Book and Gowan Winning. Yeah, honestly, if you're gonna like, Graeber's book got me reading into Michael Hudson, who I think is much better on these works. Although Michael Hudson again takes some literary evidence, like from ancient Judaism, and over extrapolates it. And like he thinks, like, for example, that Levitical law was ever enforced. We have no evidence that Levitical law was actually used. I think the Foucault-Chomsky debate's fun. I also I like it when Bertrand Williams beats up on people. I think E.P. Thompson's takedown of Althusser still stands. Those kinds of things. Favorites as far as black metal goes: Wolf in the Throne Room. Who won the Chomsky? It depends on what you're on. I think Chomsky has a lot of good points, but he's essentially a Kantian, and he won't admit it. And Foucault has a lot of good points, but he won't even grant that there's any kind of inanity, or even that like there's a trend, like that there's any biological nature of humans that like basically his epistemes idea is like total conceptual relativism. They're completely unsurprising given what I know about Foucault. I've been hearing stuff that mirror that since the 90s. It's like when the Black Books came out and people were like, oh, Heidegger was a Nazi, and I was like, duh, he was literally in the Nazi party. Like one of his colleagues, Jaspers, wouldn't rescind the colonist ban. Let's see where we're at. So I guess my stance on the Foucault-Chomsky debate is they both showed weaknesses in the other party that are for real. I also think, I kind of have a soft spot for both Foucault and Chomsky, even though in my own intellectual, they were beaten into me so much in my early intellectual formation because of when I went to school, as was Derrida, as was Heidegger. Yeah, Hudson's pretty great though. I mean, Hudson's work on like ancient Mesopotamian stuff is actually really interesting. You know what I've been really interested in lately? Fundamental Principles of Communist Production and Distribution. I need to read it. Tom is, going off on it lately, and I like the direction Tom's moving in as opposed to some of the other directions Tom has moved in the past, where cheerleading Syriza or Prodemos. We'll pretend he never did that. Yeah, the literary evidence he cites is in the Bible, and he takes the Bible at face value. Well, I like the Enlightenment critically. I mean, I don't know. It's weird though watching a lot of people glom onto the Enlightenment for essentially centrist politics, whether it's in liberal or Marxist terminology. But that's too close to political, and I don't want to start ranting again. Okay. For 15 minutes, you're allowed to ask me political or podcast related questions, and then I'm going to cut that off, and then I'm going to go to bed. I'm not going to go to bed. It's only 8:30. I'm going to stop talking to you guys. I'm going to watch a Bergman movie. Anything? Going once. Going twice. Going 3 times. No questions? No questions. Yeah. No, I am not discussing Foucault with Heidi Matthews and Doug Lane. Am I post left? That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, my political trajectory, yeah, Marxism comes as a response and a development from and a response against liberalism. We can't, it's not just anti-liberalism, nor is it an extension of liberalism. Yeah, I think that's a real problem too, from what I understand of it, John. But I haven't read enough. I literally got the book this week to sit down. No, I didn't actually. Read that essay again. I said I identified with why post-leftism would be popular. The current round of post-leftism actually disgusts me. What I said in that book, though, is Berger was being dishonest on why it was becoming popular. Yes, I did watch it. Heads up, Doug. When I return to the left, it has already been stated that Doug has to do a self-critical essay, because when I left in hiatus, I left because, hey, you don't know how to respond to this post-left stuff, and he's like, I'm going to critique it and push it beyond itself, and then he just does a bunch of fairly uncritical interviews, with the exception of an essay he did on Glenn Greenwald, in which he hid his criticism of Glenn Greenwald until the end. and he interviewed Greenwald, I think yesterday. I don't know. He was supposed to interview him. Maybe I shouldn't out that. But yes, I watched it. I was mad. That Marx Marx has never said he was a socialist. Said he wasn't a socialist. Well, in the context of French socialism, yes, but he used the term all the time because he used them interchangeably. There's a bunch of decontextualized stuff, and it basically made Marxism populism. There's the current round of post-left stuff, if we're completely honest, is a bunch of I'm talking about, once I finish the Lasch book, writing a book on the Tronti-Nagiri debates with P.H. Higgins. Yeah, I know. Doug was in a recent Platypus video. Yeah, but all kinds of people in Platypus panels. I mean, like, to be invited to a Platypus panel, Platypus usually has to think they can put you in contact with a person in a way that exposes your ideology as weak. That's the strategy. I know. I was in the group. They do think it's not that they don't think they can learn from those panels, but you can always tell that with the Critrone gloss at the end that the learning's limited and increasingly limited. But I think, to go back to people who think I'm post-left, let's see. I don't think the PMC thesis is correct. I don't like populism. I think most of Marxology is crap. He didn't, from what I can tell. What I think, though, that they're right about is a lot of the current. It would be nice if he actually interviewed the Sparts. That'd be fun. Originally, Doug was going to interview all the sects. I know personally that he doesn't actually buy into the PMC thesis, but he can't explain it because it's not part of the circuit of production in a clear way, and in a way that is coherent as a. Oh, okay. Communism isn't about inequality in the liberal sense of inequality. Like, you're not going to do away with human difference. That's Marx's point. In fact, I think there's a lot of ideas in Marxism that, like, human difference will actually expand when you have material basis of being. No, he's not. Amy Therese won't talk to him. He has interviewed her before, but it was a long time ago. It was back before the Proctor-Amy split. Platypuses in Europe and in Asia, mostly in Frankfurt and the UK. Also in Taiwan, and me and Carrie Graham were platypus Korea for a long time, for about 2 years. If you want my real opinion on this, yeah, it's funny because everyone's trying to define a class into existence because it's hot to mention and because people are pissed off that Bernie lost. But you should have known better. And everyone got mad at me a year ago when I told you should have known better, that even if Bernie had won, that you would not see things that much less anemic than the than the Biden administration, and maybe even less so. So, like, this turn right when that happens is completely predictable, but it is a turn right. And what bothers me is that people aren't owning up to it. Yeah, a lot of the chapters though, that like Platypus is about 200 people. It might be larger now, but when I was in it, it was about 200 people, and most of those 200 people were in 3 schools. There were sub chapters of about 5 to 10 people who did a lot of media outreach in other areas, and there's the stuff in the UK. But yeah, Pascal Robert might have a good definition of PMC, but my point is people are trying to make that definition work because people have repopularized a weird thesis. What do you think of the recent Twitter discourse? That's not okay. Yes, it's recent, but it's an old Marxist meme coming from the 60s, which is a misunderstanding of stuff in the 50s. It was true in the 1950s in the United States alone. Good night, Erica. Currently, it is not true, and it's funny that the people throw that out as the distinction between the global north and the global south actually declines a little bit. Yeah, but that's an old misreading of Engels's labor aristocracy. Yeah, that is what it is. This PMC discourse is an ask for Burnham's managerial elite. It and Peter Turchin's overproduction of elites, and Michael Land's overclass. And I don't even dislike any of those theories, but they're not Marxist. And people got to be honest about it. Yep, that's what. And Burnham was when I've seen people try to paint Burnham as a leftist. He once he broke with Trotskyism, he worked for he was one of the founding members of the OSS during the Managerial Revolution book, and then after it in the Machiavellians, which has been reprinted as the Modern Machiavellians. He clearly thinks that Italian fascism produces the best elites, and that should be the model for the United States' military elite. And he also predicts that the Eisenhower model would be dominant for the rest of the U.S.'s history, which was just wrong. Burnham is right about Pareto effects, and he is right about there is a need for a managerial strata that is a labor aristocracy. Favorite Bergman movie? I don't know. I like all of them, but probably Franny and Alexander. My what I said about the post left though, and I am more sympathetic to the second round of post left thought, which is the anarchist post left, or the first round, which is the left communist post left. I am not sympathetic to the current round because it's you're right, it's right wing populism. And a lot of people's response to current radical liberals' anti-liberalism has led to making that stuff look attractive. Also, it gives a nice self-important model. I like Vijay Prashad's work. Vivek Chibber. I like some of Vivek's early work, but it's a little hard to parse who's right. Vijay is an ML. But I mean, ML's gonna get like I published J. Paul Mouthwad. Like I'm the guy who pushed that at 0 books, not because I'm a Maoist or an ML. I'm clearly not. And actually, I actually think parts of that book are terrible. But parts of that book, particularly the stuff talking about how modern Maoism really didn't begin until the 80s in the West and in the third world, is interesting. I like Vijay's work too. But I would, I like some of Chibber's work. I mean, some of Chibber's, Manfred Paul kind of rocks. When he talks about science, he's off his rocker. But he's a good he. But Vijay's work is pretty good on the history of the third world revolutions. Where I disagree with them is I think they're essentially bourgeois revolutions. I just don't think that's bad. Yeah, exactly. In some ways, it posts less popularity, and its error lies in the fact that instead of looking at the material reality of working class lives, we have historically romanticized it. I completely stand by my statement there. I like Carl Zimmer a lot. I used to like P.Z. Myers, even though he's too liberal for me. I actually like Stephen Jay Gould. I'm not gonna lie. I know it's Vivek is good about the power of unions and good about some of the more dishonest trends of post-structural, post-colonial theory. VJ is better on the actual development of third world revolutions. Vivek, however, takes a basically pop front but run by social democrats view to how we should rebuild the union movement. I think it's unrealistic. It's also standard. I also agree with you. Washington Bullets and VJ's Washington Bullets stuff is really good. So again, I don't read people for whether or not they're a Trotskyist or MML or whatever, because I mean, like, I love Samir Amin. He's an ML. I don't agree with a lot of Samir Amin, but I love him. Yeah, I have Red Star of the Third World and a People's History, the Darker Nations and the Poorer Nations. I have all three of those books. And I think I have Washington Bullets too. And I have Vivek's critique of post-colonial theory and a lot of his papers on Asia. Vivek's papers on Asia actually, his scholarly papers on Asia actually aren't bad. I think having a simple litmus test for any of it, like J. Paul Malfred, I think is one of the best historians of the development of Maoism after the crisis of Dingism. I don't think, and I think he does he attempts to do some interesting works on science, but he's basically doing high Stalinist apologia on what he means by science, and it's kind of laughable. Bringing Karl Popper in there is a weird move, but you got to do what you're gonna do. I've also seen like John Paul Malford really defend settlers on things that are like Jay Sakai he's not as bad as people actually make him out to be, but like he makes up Marx quotes and stuff. Like there's stuff in Jay Sakai that just isn't, there's no citation for it, no one can find it anywhere. So yeah. I'm going to talk more about unions with someone on Wednesday. It's going to be all unions all the time. Because I think a lot of people think I'm a union abstentionist, and I'm absolutely not. But I do think, no, he's not that bad. He's not that. It is Stalin apologia on science. He's not like doing Goldberg first stuff. Like most Maoists, J. Malford Paul knows better than to. I like Jakarta method. J. Malford Paul knows better than to directly comment on those on purge issues. But I like the Jakarta method. I think it's a good book. Yeah, they're both good books. Scott Horton does good. Scott Horton's just a liberal, but he does good books in this too. I think there's a lot of. I have been disheartened by the fact that the left, outside of some of the fringes of anti-imperial thought, we have a flag here. All right, block the user. I think Adolf Reed is right in his critique of the anyone who flies stars and bars on my I'm a southerner, but anyone who flies stars and bars and comes on with that crap is gonna get banned. Um, ask me if I'm a virgin, married twice, and anyway, the mind of the average reactionary these days actually makes me sad. When I was a reactionary, we were smarter than that. But I would have taken a chud like that and beat them with a pistol. So, did I say that out loud? Anyway, on Adolf Reed, I think he's right about the development of leadership strata, you know, which has its own bourgeois interest. Do I also think Adolf Reed was right about American affairs played for the left at common graph to do damage on their behalf. Yeah. What I think is interesting though is yeah, Scott Horton is a lib, and the other Scott Horton there's another Scott Horton who also does some foreign policy, is a libertarian, and they're both good. Adolf Reed is right about American affairs, and I can tell you because I know someone who wrote an article for American Affairs that the reason why he wrote it is because American Affairs pays better, pays about $1,000 for an article, whereas Jacobin left and stuff don't pay as well or at all. What I will say though is, he was right that Nagel and them got and basically are doing right wing apologia. What I find interesting though is that if we're honest, Buckley's a kind of embarrassing reactionary. But yes, he was interesting to read. But these internet chuds are something else. Yep. Yeah, I mean, Michael Lind is trying to build some kind of centrist nationalism that is broadly populist. He's tried to do it with both the right when he was in the American Enterprise Institute and the left. What is interesting about Michael Lind is I actually think his sociological analysis for Bavarian is actually kind of good, but his politics is sketchy. And their articles on corporatism on American Affairs really tells you what they're at. And corporatism here has its appropriate backdrop. It's funny to me how a lot of these people will come on and scream ad hominem though when you point this stuff out, but then they only do ad hominems when they talk about leftist and basically structural conspiracy theories when they talk about leftist. So take it whatever you want to take it with. I have no idea what Buckley's sexuality was. The muse, does it have a place in? You mean inspiration? Sure. But most poetry is just hard work. It's a skill like anything else. Like any art, you do need something to get you going, but I have not read Varoufakis' new book because my entire experience with Varoufakis has been entirely negative. And I kind of resent his continued popularity on the left, other than his failed attempt to do something which he should have known he wouldn't have been able to do. I actually like it was weird watching the old Buckley versus um uh James Baldwin, because I actually like I thought the question was dumb. Um yeah, I'll look into Chronosis if I need to. I actually like young Christopher Hitchens. Old Christopher Hitchens is a different deal. Well, I mean, I've been hearing people tell me that Varoufakis was going to be so awesome since Doug Henwood had him on a show when I was still living in America the first time. Um, uh, I actually like some of the early Hitchens books, but you can see where he was going. Oh yeah, I mean, poor Varoufakis. I mean, I actually do feel bad for him, but like, he should have known better. I I can't get over how many people haven't owned up to how wrong they were going to be about Syriza and how right I was. People disowned me for what I said about what's going to happen with Syriza, and I was totally. I was like, they're going to try to pull a stunt. The EU's not going to play ball. They're going to get actually worse still, and they're going to have to take it. They're going to have to make allegiances with right wingers because the center won't work with them. Um, Varoufakis is like he's in that weird gray area between like MMT SOCDEM and anarchist. Um, so he's on the left, but where exactly is a little strange. He was more anarchistic before his role in Syriza, in my mind. Hitchens never said he was a conservative, just as a heads up. Um, although his foreign policy was consistent with his own views of developmentalism. Um, which Hitch? Unless we're talking about Peter Hitchens, in which case I have did a whole podcast on him at Parallax Views. Christopher Hitchens debate with John Bolton forever ago. I vaguely remember it. If that's who we're talking about. All right. Well, two more questions and I'm done. I need to go spend some time with my partner, and these will come back and forth over time. Oh, Varoufakis' debate with Bolton? No, I haven't seen it. Yeah, I know Peter. I respect Peter, the conservative Hitchens, actually a lot more than I respect Christopher. But I actually have a soft spot for them both. Um, I have had mixed views on Peter Hitchens for a long time. I don't. Angela Nagel liked him uncritically, which was a big hint to me, and that was way before all the current shenanigans was outed. But I've always thought that Hitchens had integrity, even if he was essentially a reactionary. Um, and I guess sometimes I actually have said it's like I would respect a lot of the Pulse. What could have been done instead so that Syriza would have succeeded? Nothing. There was no success criterion. If they'd actually left, I guess they could have attempted Grexit, and we could have seen what they could have done. Um, but I don't think they could have done much, because here's the thing: even under MMT, your productive capacity or your ability to tap into the circuit of international production is still your limit, right? So there is a limit, and And actually, the non-MMTers, but the MMT adjacent heterodox Keynesians were actually a little bit more dodgy on this. So like they needed like this has been a problem for MMT and non imperial core, non-Anglo, basically non-imperial core, non-Anglo and Japan things, because to float your own currency and have true currency sovereignty, so you don't have to peg it to a foreign country, you need to have enough purchasing power, and as a small nation you can't have that. So what you have to do is join up with a bunch of other nations and can form federations, but if you do that you lose currency sovereignty and your ability to make policy. It's why like the working for the state is different than working for the Fed. So like if I'm a high school teacher working for the state, I am subject to the business cycle. I know I had to leave my job because I was going to get laid off because we didn't have enough tax revenues in Georgia. This has experienced my life directly. But if I'm a federal worker, I'm not as subject to the business cycle if the feds don't mind taking the debt. Yeah, you know what Nagel mostly wrote and developed her stuff in Britain. She was born in Texas, but she lived in Ireland, I have found it interesting how many of the post leftists are not Americans. Doug did not construct Nagel. Nagel was constructed by momentum and spiked. Doug just defended her and kept defending her because it was the biggest thing making us money, and because he believed in part of the book. Because Doug lives in Portland, and I actually tend to think the rest of the world, supposed left, does not exist as much as people say it does either. Just as a heads up, having lived in a lot of the rest of the world, I've actually been surprised that I thought as an American that I would find all these leftists everywhere, and I did not. But I defended Nagel for a little while, although I wrote a critique of the book, and then on that, when Thaddeus Rotterdam interviewed Nagel about a year before the big controversies happened, or maybe it was 6 months, I actually wrote Doug an email saying she's a nationalist. Is the PMC discourse thing outside of the U.S.? I don't know. So what I find interesting is a lot of people pushing it are not. They're Swedish, they're Irish, they're Australian. It's being slowly picked up by leftists in the U.S. and it's thrown around casually now all the time. Is she just trying to sell books? I don't know. I do know that when she wrote that piece that takes a Marx quote out of context about the Irish and all kinds of stuff, and then did all the unheard stuff too. Yeah, that was the math stuff. But she had some of the stuff she'd said on Thaddeus Russell had indicated to me. Yeah, well, she actually used the Marx quote about the Irish to justify border control, and I actually pointed out to Doug that like she exempted parts of the quote that reversed what he was saying, that it was a dishonest quotation. Favorite Zero Books text, the one I'm going to write for it. I like Heavy Radicals a lot. Even though that guy doesn't work for us anymore. Zero Books took yeah, I realize that nationalism in Ireland is a very, very different beast. But I also, she wasn't talking about it in a way that made me feel like it was an Irish nationalist thing only. Um, I have no nationalist in Ireland who would not set off alarm bells. But even there are legit criticisms that any leftist should make. Probably Catherine Liu blocked me many, many years ago because I said something mean about Doug Henwood, which is funny now. Yeah, that's exactly what I noticed. It was ethno nationalist, not civic nationalist, and it wasn't just against the UK. And she was always hazy on workers' international solidarity. In fact, there are rumors that she was kind of a fan of Stalinism because she liked the idea of socialism in one country. And I warned Doug about that. I took a charitable issue too. The other thing I warned him about that people weren't critiquing her on is that yeah, me too. Is that not yet, no. I think the Iranian Revolution throws leftists for a loop, actually. Any nationalism can go reactionary, though. Even the most progressive nationalism and imperialist and anti-imperial poles can go reactionary. Trust me. I feel like I've seen it several times in my life. Anyway, that's I don't maybe I mean she was born in Texas is all I know. I don't know much about her background other than that. It's hard to find stuff out about her. And also don't begrudge people their private life. So, but she was born in Texas, I grew up in Ireland, went to school in Britain. That's what I know. She came to us through Ashley Foley and James Hartfield and the old Spike connections to Zero, which predate Doug. Not Ashley doesn't, but the relationship to Spike to Zero Books goes back to yes, I am a Nick Cave fan. Yeah, so one thing I would say about Nagel's book that I critiqued it is she didn't take the alt right's history and modern in uh, traditionalist anti-modernism and the European and American new right movement very seriously. Yes, I've read what Nick Land has to say about Kumbala. Yeah, I think so. Let me see where Nagel went to school. I know she was really involved in Corbynism at one point. No, she didn't go to school. She went to school in Ireland. Excuse me. Yep, she grew up in Dublin and went to Dublin City University. So yeah, sorry about that. I love the new Cave Ellis album on racial capitalism. It's a thing. Oh yeah, in the United States, it definitely was. Um, even though they supported, left. I mean, Well, yeah, I love Lasch most of my life too. I have issues with Lasch's later work, and I think Nagel's actually kind of a bad reader of Lasch. Um, when asked to come on Zero Books to do a podcast on Lasch and cultural narcissism, she bailed. I think to debate Sargon of Akkad, um, and left me to actually do the book discussion. And I love, obviously I love Lasch. I think Lasch is utterly misrepresented by almost all of his fans, except for his students, who are all basically liberal academics. Why was Lang so dismissive of racial capitalism? Because I think Lang has some spiked ideas going on. Frankly, um, a lot of people. I mean, a lot of paleo conservatives. From the late '90s through the aughts, the people mostly writing about Christopher Lasch were actually paleo conservatives. He was largely forgotten on the left. A lot of people took his Tikkun articles as his break with the left, although he was really frustrated with the academic left of the 1980s, which makes total sense. I would be too. I don't know. She was supposed to rewrite to write an introduction to Kill All Normies, remove all the problematic parts, cite everything, and we were going to release a second edition. And when Doug went to critique her, she broke ties. And yeah, we did a special podcast on this. Although that special podcast was a proto Parrot Room release. Yeah, well, the thing is, Lasch gets weird in the 1980s. I think focusing on left academics in the 1980s when Marxism was dead damaged him. Honestly, he also, had some particularly complicated views on the family. So. He does not actually think that returning to the bourgeois and working class families of the 19th and 20th century was possible in the late 20th century. He actually explicitly says it's not. So, I don't have it, but there's 3 hours of it recorded. And yeah, I'm still doing the Lasch book. Doug had me announce it too early because we were still rereading all the Lasch books to write about it. Shallon and I have written the introduction, and we reread all the books, including some of the rare ones, and now I'm going through articles. Because Lasch is the only person who does a genealogy of the American left back to the 1890s in an intellectually honest way that does not try to start everything with the new left in the United States and then romanticize the Popular Front period. Yeah, and he's literally the only person I know who does it. No one else writes on that period. He also, for someone who people read as like a proto post leftist, he writes glowingly about the black nationalist. He's honest about something that I've said too. I've said that conservatives are actually often more honest about the problems of the working class than leftists are, and definitely than liberal leftists are. Doug is my friend. Oh yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, but also Reagan had people read Saul Al-Kalinsky. Phyllis Schlafly was using New Left community organizing tactics to get evangelicalism out. If that's your rubric, then the thing is, when you read Lasch, Lasch is just very honest about the collective action problems. He's honest about misreadings of Marxism. He's honest about fetishizing certain forms of revolution that don't seem possible at certain points. He's one of the first people I know that pointed out how many of the comment of the dissent, not dissent, the Partisan Review, ended up working for the OSS. He wrote about that before that was known and released. I don't write much. I'm a dyslexic and aphasic. I only write with other people. I write poetry. So no, I wouldn't say me. I thought Russell Jacoby was that, but the books that were close to that were in the 80s. There's some good books on the SPA that are like subject specific, but not anything that tries to be as broad as Lasch was. What I would say is the American left and this is universally true almost, fetishizes Europe. And even like to the point of not really understanding its own history. And sadly, the only other people who do work on this time period are often MLs who want to vindicate the CPUSA. So unfortunately, no. The one thing I'll say about Lasch that I critique Lasch for early on is Lasch's class analysis is at points sloppy. I pointed out that in his early works, he talks about working class Mormons in the burnt over district, but what he really means is sharecroppers and poor people. So for him, working class is, manual labor. Yes, I think leftists need to read more history than theory. I think theory can only be tested against history. And even, history is not 100% predictor of what's going to happen, right? But like, you got to test your theory against history. You also have to logic and game theoretical. I know game theory is unpopular on the left because it's, it was invented by right wingers for sketchy reasons. But I use game theory in a lot of my calculations. I also think you need to know basic economics. You need to know why Marxism is different from neoclassical economics to understand what Marxism actually is. It's not like, that's when someone asks you think Marxism is not about inequality. And no, it's not about inequality in that sense. When I think American left fetishizes Europe because one, there is some weird Eurocentric stuff going on in there. But two, there's also a sense in which Europe center left seem to have more stuff. However, I also agree that when I was in Europe, I would have European leftoids yell at me about how awful America is with American arguments, with American sources, with American categories, and even with American categories about race, which were really weird. Like this anti-American, like left German academic that I worked with on Former People was like always picking up like radical liberal talking points straight from the United States in a really dishonest way. So the American left fetishized, like, it's actually was really hilarious to me when like Mark Kahn was complaining about critical race theory ruining French academia, when I was like, well, all those categories came from French anyway. No, one of the reasons why game theory isn't a rule is because very few games are zero sum. I also think, leftists have a problem with psychology, social psychology, forensic psychology, etc. Well, I have a good book on Nigerian communism. What do you mean by radical liberalism? I mean what is presented. Usually, I mean either post-structuralism or critical race theory, or things that pull from a bunch of varied anti-liberal discourses or non-liberal discourses that are used to buoy up bourgeois parties in the United States. So I have some stuff on Ethiopian. I have a good book on Nigerian communism. That's what I got. I also think people need to really study China more, and not in the like ML wankery way. Like really study it. I also think people need to study the Middle Eastern communists and how they got nowhere and didn't know how to respond to the cultural issues of the Middle East and imperialism. Blah blah blah. And I don't want to debate Antifa. It's too many different things. I think most of the people entered a real meaning. I think a lot of it ends up being excessive and, you know, whatever. Well, I would say the first 3 books by Christopher Lasch, not any ones beyond that, but so that would be The Anarchy American Left, Profiles in New American Radicalism, or New Radicalism in America, yeah, and The Wealth of Nations. No, The World of Nations, not The Wealth of Nations. The World of Nations. There's a good book on the PCUSA. There's a good book. There's 2 good books on the PCUSA. There's some classic takes on the history of socialism in general. There's a lot of good stuff coming out in China, some of which is very critical. So yeah. No, I think Freud is. I think Freud is good, deep description, and it's proto-scientific. I think like Lacan's stuff in the Marrow stage is proto-scientific. Yeah, I knew someone who was literally the daughter of someone who's in the Iraq's Communist Party. But I think neurology has to be considered forensics. It's just without for example, I think evolutionary psychology is pseudoscientific, but you got to understand comparative biology. You have to. And if we're going to talk about human sciences and not deal with comparative biology, we're fooling ourselves. And I've gone so far as to say a lot of the left is a lot of the left-wing theory comes from literary and cultural theory, which I literally used to say, 20 years ago, is the elephant's graveyard of psychology and philosophy. It's where stuff that fails in those fields goes to die because delusions can use their frameworks to reappropriate them and generate infinite number of rereading papers. But somehow that became a basis of left-wing theory, probably because most of us were educated in the humanities. However, now working with a bunch of cybernetic and engineering communists, I now see the problems with that too. So, yeah, the Iranian Communist Party needs to be studied, and unfortunately, when I have talked to Gene Bajalan, who works for me at Zero, is really big on this stuff. He's a Kurd. Whenever we talk about the Iranian Communist Party, inevitably either an Islamist or an ML will accuse us of repeating Saudi propaganda. So I don't know what to say. Anyway, all right, I've been on for 2 hours and 8 minutes. I'll be doing less of these. I was on vacation. I got to go back to my day job, teaching kids online and developing. Epigenetics is not a pseudoscience, but the way it's being sold to leftists as Lamarckianism is. So what epigenetics is actually about is protein noise affecting gene expression. And some of that is inheritable in consistent ways. So, for example, it can affect weight gain if you're and stuff like that. But I've seen a lot of people take epigenetics and try to use it to basically justify Lamarckianism or or Engel's dialectics of nature. And I think that's sketch. I also think I think people need to remember that Engels was really good on scientific theory of the 19th century. 19th century scientific theory, however, was shit. I mean, like Engels writes about Lamarckian. I mean, like Lemurians and stuff. I need to read more Razib Khan. I don't have a formulated opinion totally yet. Yeah. Yeah, environmental factors can turn genes on and off because we're social creatures and our genes have social triggers. It's like the whole nature nurture, but like innate non-innate debate doesn't make sense. It's weirdly something I think Marx was actually prescient on, is that human nature is socially conditioned in a way in which different environmental triggers will change it. It's a false dichotomy. Exactly, Nicola. It's a false dichotomy. Like, so there, like, and it's something that well, I follow biology. Like, this is why I want to have Arnold from Fight Like an Animal. I mean, he's an anarchist, and I actually disagree with him on some things in anthropology, but we're both at least taking the current research seriously. I have heard Mark Levin, and I haven't read that research yet. So I guess that's adding one more thing to the 85,000 things I need to read. I mean, so far you guys asked me about Sufism, Zoroastrianism, my thoughts on epigenetics, politics, the history of the world, art, music. Yeah. Somebody asked me if I was a virgin, but they were reactionary. Anyway, all right, I'm off. I'm gonna look up this Razib Khan. Married twice. And Chronesis, and Grimlock really wants me to read Chronesis. All right, Grimlock. It's yeah, you guys. But do we cover ancient aliens? Oh God. So you read all of EndNotes? Yeah, I read all of EndNotes. Yeah, I'll just leave it. I read all of EndNotes, but we're focusing on a history of separation. I like EndNotes Volume 1. I actually think the side that EndNotes didn't win that debate. I like EndNotes Volumes 3 and 4, although Volume 4 also has driven me mad. All right, good night. For real.